ACCA, the world's most forward-thinking professional accountancy body.
Welcome everybody to this month's episode of Careerwise, and this time we're looking at psychometric tests, and we're joined by Ben Williams, who I've known for a while, and he's a well-established people assessment expert within recruitment and development, but he'll do a better job of introducing himself. Over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Neil. Hi, everyone. So I'm a Chartered Occupational Psychologist. I've now been doing this for a quarter of a century, which makes me sound positively ancient. I have been running my company called Sten 10 for now 13 years. And what we do is we design these psychometric assessments. So I'm the person I'd like to think that you love to hate or hate to love. I'm also the former chair of the Association for Business Psychology. So hopefully I can give you a bit of insight into what psychologists do behind the scenes when they create assessment processes.
Yeah, I think your insight's going to be invaluable for this. And I think a best place to start is perhaps really at the beginning. It's probably something that most people have heard of, whether they've experienced them or not, had to do them or not, I'm not sure. But what exactly is psychometric testing within the sphere of job hunting and recruitment?
Yeah, so a psychometric test typically refers to a measure of someone's psychological makeup, and it's typically talking about personality, motivation, or your reasoning skills. What a psychometric test does is that we seek to establish certain qualities that show that that test is going to do what it's supposed to do. So we look statistically whether it predicts those people that go on to be the best in the job, or we look at whether there are differences in how different groups answer the questions to see if it's fair or not. So a psychometric test is generally something that's used for recruitment or for development, looking at personality, motivation, reasoning, and it's got some robustness behind it.
So when an employer gets the results back, do they have a certain set of results they're looking for, or how does that work?
Well, I always say the most important step in any psychometric testing project is to be clear about what success looks like. And that's not always intuitive. So, if we take a look at the caring profession, you might think that the very best nurses are those that have huge levels of empathy and caringness for the patients that they look after. Actually, when we've investigated this by speaking to nurses and looking at the relationship between how they answer these questionnaires and how they do in the job, actually you need to be a little bit detached to be a good nurse, because otherwise you take it home, you ruminate on it, you can't let go of it, and actually you find it too stressful. So the first step is to be really clear about the personality traits required of the job, and also, like when you're talking about people's reasoning skills, just how smart you need to be, because if you only recruit people in the top 5% of numerical reasoners in the world, are they going to feel fulfilled in your job? Are they going to feel underutilised and actually find it a bit frustrating? So I think how they tend to use them is, first of all, they do job analysis to understand what the job requires, and then either they or an occupational psychologist will buy or build something that seeks to assess those traits and give them a number, essentially. On a reasoning test, they'll compare you against a comparison group. They'll say maybe you're in the top 10%, top 50%, bottom 30%. And with something like personality, where there's no such thing as a good or a bad personality unless you're Hannibal Lecter, it's more about to what extent do you fit the personality profile that we know is going to succeed in this job. So are we looking for someone who's detail conscious? Are we looking for someone that's maybe more introverted because they're going to be working on their own quite a bit? So for personality, you look at the degree of match between what people have answered and the job requirements.
Okay, so if I'm a job hunter, when might I come across this first? Is it often the first round of like a job application?
Usually it's used as an effective way to get the numbers down, especially for those reasoning tests. You might be asked to submit an application form or CV first of all, and then the next step is often some kind of reasoning test. The reason why they're chosen is that they tend to be the single best predictor of future performance, how good you are at solving problems, reasoning, that kind of thing. They might sift out anything between 30% of applicants or as many as 70% of applicants on the basis of that first stage. And then personality generally comes a little bit later on, when they have a bit more time to spend on a smaller pool of people, get to know them a little bit more deeply.
I was going to ask about this later, but now you've mentioned it, I wanted to know, what is the difference between psychometric testing and personality testing? Perhaps sometimes they're seen as one and the same, but they're not, are they?
No, so I'd say personality testing is a subset of the psychometric test labels. So psychometrics cover personality, motivation, reasoning, values, situational judgment tests. Personality just looks at your preferred way of thinking, feeling, behaving in the workplace.
Can these all be done online?
Well, they've gone through a few seismic shifts in the quarter of a century I've been doing it. I mean, when I started, it was paper and pencil predominantly, and the psychologists would score them all by hand, and you'd have to be very good at counting up people's scores. Then they moved online, and there was a whole lot of worry, like, are people going to be cheating? Are they going to get their friend to come along and sit the test? That was investigated, and I think they found about 14% of applicants on average cheated at online psychometrics. So most companies thought, well, 14% is probably an acceptable band of error, and we'll retest them later on, so we'll do it because it's more effective. Now we have the next wave of cheatability, which is, can people perhaps use generative AI to help answer some of these questions? And some organisations are now making the decision to bring some of the testing back in-house so they can actually watch you complete it. So we've kind of gone full circle, yeah.
Okay, and due to technology, perhaps it can be used by smaller businesses as well, different types of organisations. So it's not just seen as a big graduate recruitment for big corporations sort of a tool.
No, it definitely got more and more widespread. I mean, the Institute of Student Employers releases research as to what proportion of graduate employers uses these psychometric tests, and it's still around about the 50 to 60% of them. I'd say that normally for the best psychometric tests, you should be trained in order to use them and administer them. I think some parts of the psychometric testing world are a little bit Wild West. I once had a psychometric test that asked me, when I think about sex, swimming or eating, I get a warm glow that spreads all over my body, true or false? And I was like, what on earth is that all about? And it was something to do with Jungian theory about our sexual drivers, totally inappropriate for the workplace. So yes, you will find them with all size organisations. I'd say that not all psychometric tests are created equal. But yeah, I think just because you're applying to a smaller firm doesn't mean that they'll have a lower quality test.
Yeah, because I can imagine you can buy them off the rack, kind of. It's really important for the company to design it for their jobs and for their needs. And if you haven't gone through that process, perhaps you're letting yourself down, but also letting the candidates down.
Yeah, I mean, the candidate experience when taking these tests is something that's grown in priority over the years. So when I started, it was a bit more like they will sit the test and they will like it. Whereas over time, it was more like, well, actually, maybe we need to make it an engaging process so they actually sit these tests rather than say, forget that, I'm not doing it. We need to maybe entice them to join us and use it as a chance to talk about our scheme and what we can offer and the culture, maybe even to dispel some myths. I worked with one bank who were getting a lot of graduate applications, and they were expecting when they joined to be able to travel the world. And in this test that we designed for them, which was a blend of questions and situational judgment, like scenarios, what would you do in the scenario? We were just clear about what are the reasons for you applying for this position. And if they ticked, I want to travel the world, amongst other things, then they would get some feedback and say, well, maybe you want to double check the role descriptions to make sure. So the tests that we develop aim to both assess, but also to engage and educate. So they get a bit of a preview into what life in the job is like. And I'd say that even if a company chooses an off-the-shelf test, they've chosen it for a reason. And if you really detest the test itself, then that's probably going to be reflective of the type of reasoning you're going to need to do on the job. So you might want to think twice.
Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned the user experience, which is important. Are they something you should be worried about as a candidate? Are they something you can prepare for?
Yeah, I mean, to answer the first point about should you be worried, I mean, a good psychometric test doesn't seek to trip you up. So there's not going to be a hidden question, so they ask you one thing, but really they're getting at another. It should be pretty straightforward. So a bit of worry is natural. I would say that what you want to avoid is over ruminating upon it, because there's this phenomena in psychology called stereotype threat. And what it relates to is that thing that can sometimes go through your head that says people like me don't belong here. People like me don't do well at these types of tests. People like me don't get jobs at these kind of firms. And those kind of thoughts, if they're running through your head, can be quite distracting when you're in the test itself. So I would do everything you can to keep your worry levels low. See it as part of the process that everyone's going through. Everyone's going to feel a bit nervous, but the good news is that you can prepare for them. So you're not caught out by silly mistakes. I mean, I'd probably say things like reasoning tests. So a numerical reasoning test, the simplest way to prepare for that is to brush up on the fundamental rules of mathematics so that you feel comfortable doing ratios, percentages, proportions, that kind of thing. Verbal reasoning tests and abstract reasoning tests, where you have certain shapes and what one comes next in the sequence, you can get practice tests of that. And once you've done a few, you start spotting the rules that underlie them. So those abstract reasoning tests, what one comes next in the sequence, you'll pretty quickly spot, well, it's usually a rule involving maybe an increasing number of shapes or a rotation of shapes or a mirror image of a shape. And after doing a few of them, you'll just get quicker. And speed is one of the things that affects your score. I think a personality questionnaire is a bit different. You can't really get better at a personality questionnaire.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
You can try and fake it if you want, although there are checks built in that see whether, for example, you've been consistent throughout. Also, there'll be the odd question in there like, I have never told a lie, or I've never upset anyone. And if you go through saying, oh yeah, that's definitely like me, I've never upset anyone, I've never told a lie, you get a high score on this scale called social desirability. So it means you've been really keen to portray a positive impression. It doesn't mean you're lying necessarily, but it might put a little flag up on your application. So I would just say, be honest, be yourself. You want a job that you're well suited for personality-wise. Obviously, I mean, there's certain things, like if you're going for a job that involves a lot of selling to people, persuading people, there'll be questions around persuading and influencing. And if you say, I hate persuading people, I hate negotiating, I hate influencing, then don't be surprised if you get a thank you but no thank you in the
absolutely
in the post.
Yeah. You talked about several different types of tests there. Now, there are quite a few different types, aren't there? But I imagine there's some which are more commonly used. If you're a candidate, can you ask the employer what types of tests you're using? Can you also ask what for?
Yeah, I think there's no harm in asking anything, because typically you'll be dealing with the HR department, and that's typically not the people you'll be actually working for. So it doesn't matter if you're a bit annoying and ask a few of these questions, but most of the time they'll have a rule about what they're prepared to reveal. So if they say to you, you'll be sitting some psychometric tests, then I'd definitely ask, oh, can you tell me what types, what kind of things will you be assessing? And if you hear back verbal reasoning, abstract reasoning, and personality, then at least you know what to practice. Some people might be a bit bolder and say, can I ask what test publisher they're from? And then if you hear SHL, that might guide you down one route. If you hear that it's Pearson, it might guide you down another route. Some of the test preparation sites try to really closely replicate the test publisher's test as well. So that will get you really, really close to it. In terms of asking what they're looking for, I probably wouldn't link that to taking the test. I wouldn't say, okay, I'm sitting a personality questionnaire, what personality do I need to show you to get the job? You can ask, if it's not already publicly available, do you recruit against a competency model? So a competency model is typically 8 to 10 criteria that they've said, this is what distinguishes star performers in the job. And it might be things like teamwork, problem solving, commercial acumen, whatever it might be. And if you're feeling really cheeky, you could say, look, can you share the competency model with me? And they might give you the titles, they might give you the keys to the kingdom and give you the full definitions. Now, that will be maybe a little bit helpful in this stage, but it'll be much more helpful at the interview stage. So if you're thinking, right, they've 8 competencies, I've got an interview for an hour, they're probably going to ask about 4 of these competencies here, so I need to have an example against each of these that I feel comfortable talking about. So yeah, there's no harm in asking, and a competency model and what test publisher are you going to could be some interesting questions they might not have encountered.
Yeah,
before.
And they might be, because it's a fine line, isn't it? You don't want to overstep the mark. You don't want to put them off you by being being big pushy, you're asking the wrong questions. But I think it's fair to know what you're going in for. I can't remember what you mentioned earlier, but it made me think about the ethics side of things, how the data's used, but also now that I imagine AI is being used a lot more. Are there any concerns around if it makes mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, ethics and AI is an interesting one. So sometimes AI has been built into the test itself, but not very common at the moment. I mean, normally that might be you might interact with a chatbot and it then scores your responses, but there's not many tests like that out there. A company called HireView came out with a video interview platform that you'd record your video response to camera and it would turn your words into text, which it would then score against a competency model. But they also had an AI feature on there that would analyse your facial twitches and your tone of voice and infer your personality from those characteristics.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And it was quite good from a theoretical perspective. It got a reasonable stab at someone's personality, but candidates hated it. They said, I don't want you analysing my facial twitches. So that was withdrawn from the market. They said, okay, we'll just keep it on the basis of what people say, not their facial twitches. It's still an area of experimentation. So some psychologists get excited about what we might be able to do with it, and then it comes up against reality, which is candidates hate it, and then it's okay, we might need to rethink. Or the law, there's the EU AI Act now, which in recruitment settings, it's regarded as a high risk scenario for using AI. So there needs to be a lot of due diligence done around it before it's fully integrated. I mean, I think normally what people are talking about at the moment around AI is whether candidates are using it to cheat on their assessments rather than can the test publishers incorporate it. I sometimes do a little experiment when I go into talk at universities. I say, look, here's a verbal reasoning question. Please, can you try to solve it? You can use ChatGPT if you like. And I give them a minute to do it because that's about how long you'll have in the test. And what I generally tend to find, some people are lifting up their phones, taking a picture, putting it to ChatGPT, getting it to answer. Normally about, I'd say, 80% of people in these classes get an answer. And I'd say of those people that have got an answer, about 75, 80% of people get the right answer, because sometimes AI doesn't give you the same response.
Yeah.
Like however it's feeling, that nanosecond that you press enter. So can you cheat a verbal reasoning test using ChatGPT? You can if you've got a really good prompt to start off with and you're prepared to sit there with your phone taking pictures of it and entering it in or cutting and pasting. But you're in a bit of an arms race with the test administrators, because some of them will enable your webcam with your permission and it will take pictures of you every so often. And if it sees an obstruction, like you lifting up your phone to take a picture, or it sees a second person come onto screen, if you've asked your friend to have a look to give you some advice, it will flag that up as an infraction. And you might be asked to retake the test if you have too many of those. And there's things like they can disable your ability to go onto different screens and things. So at the end of the day, for the amount of hassle that it takes you to try and cheat using ChatGPT, potentially to get a job that you're not suited for, or potentially get rejected because there's signs that you've cheated or need to retake, I just wouldn't bother.
Yeah, it's like you said, isn't it? You probably let yourself down in the end anyway. Yeah. I'm going to quickly summarise, I think, a few things. Don't worry, you can prepare. You can ask questions about what it is you're going to be doing, and you can ask for the publisher and the competency model. Yeah. Don't cheat. I mean, that's just a good rule in life, I'd say, I think. Yeah. Have you come across, I think just maybe a nice way to finish, any ridiculous, funny tales from the front line kind of thing?
I'd say that I had the privilege, after being rejected first time round, to go to Oxford to study experimental psychology. There's lots of stories about selection process questions there that are totally bizarre. I think the one that is probably the most amusing is apparently one of the rules for getting into Oxford is one of the professors hands you a brick and says throw it through that window. And if you throw it through the window, you get rejected. But if you open the window first and throw it out, then you get a place at Oxford, which I think is ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, that's great, but we have covered everything that I wanted to talk to on this occasion. But like I said, there is avenues to go down with this, and perhaps we can dive a bit deeper in a future podcast, because it's a big, interesting subject. It is constantly evolving. And I really appreciate your time. And I don't think I've missed anything, do you think? Or any final words? But I think that was a cracking conversation.
No, I think that's been really, really enjoyable. Yeah, thank you, Neil. And I guess just wish everyone all the best in their psychometric testing adventures.
Exactly, yeah. Good luck. No fear, and prepare, and don't cheat. All right, thanks very much, Ben. For more career advice, check out the ACCA Careers website and the Student Accountant app. And if you have something in particular you'd like me to cover in the series, get in touch at studentaccountant@acccaglobal.com.
This podcast was brought to you by ACCA. Find out how we think ahead at accaglobal.com.